Welcome to the world of scale modeling with Mike Ashe, where techniques, tips, and creativity come alive with dozens of tutorials, projects, tape-up reviews, and picture references to help you build better scale models and enjoy our wonderful hobby. Welcome to part 2 of building and detailing the Revell Monogram 148 scale C-47. In part 2, we're going to modify the engine nacelles to accept 3D printed engines. We're going to modify the landing gear, and I'm going to show you how to drill out the exhaust ports. So, let's get started.
The engine assemblies on this kit are okay. The engines fit. There's a positioning tab on the inside of the cowling for the engine to slide up on. But detail on the engine is, it's okay. But if you add a wiring harness to it, it'll look a little bit better. But the thing I wanted to point out to you is that the back part of the engine assembly, there's no positioning pins for where it attaches to the wing. So you're going to have to be careful, and I recommend that you put a little bit of tester's glue on the inside area here and make sure that you scrape the paint off here, and it goes somewhat like this. Okay, this piece sits straight down, and the cowlings have to be set correctly too with these notches, and there's a big exhaust port on this side here. So that's how you have to do it. Now, with that said, here's what I've done. This is a Resin 2 Detail 3D printed engine for this kit, the 1830s, which are the same ones they use on the B-24 Liberator. And we'll go ahead, and I've got tabs here for the tape so that I can take this off and show you how I did this. Okay, this is the engine. Now, the engine was actually molded on here, and what I did was I cut it off with a razor saw, and then ran it on across a stationary piece of sandpaper and wet sanded it to get the rest of the molding off. So now it's nice and flat. And there's 3 tabs on the back here that, and you have to be careful how you install these tabs, these 3 tabs right here. Now, I had to reduce the height of these tabs for the Resin 2 Detail engine to get it to sit correctly inside the cowling. And I'll show you on this one the difference. You can see the difference in the height here. I had to cut them down a little bit, and I kind of form fitted everything into place, so I took my time on how I did this. So now this will sit here, and like I did on the B-17G build, I super glued 0.05 inch thick plastic on the back of this. I just kind of put a drop of super glue down and just did that, and of course the glue came out, and then on all around it and then I cut it out. So now this will, there we go right here, and I can use Tester's red tube glue now to position this correctly on the inside here. And then the other thing I did was on this one you can see, whoop, let me get this off of here. there's these little tabs, long tabs on the inside here. And on this one, I had to modify the tabs to get the 3D printed engine to sit correctly. So now it will sit correctly inside of here. It'll sit just like that. So that's going to look a lot better than that. Now the other thing is, I had to also tweak the edges, the top edges of the rocker arms. I sanded them down at an angle like this, just a little bit on each one, so that it would fit better inside of the cowling. Otherwise, you're going to have a problem seating it correctly. Now, the inside of the backside of the props are a little larger than the propeller shafts, and so I'll modify the backside of the propellers like I did on the B-17, so that'll get a real tight fit. But I really like these 3D printed engines, and yeah, it took a little bit of work to get after you cut this. Sand it down. It took about 20 minutes to get it sanded down. You don't want to, you got to sand it a little bit, check your work, sand it again, and I wet sanded to keep the dust down. And so now I've got everything I need, and it'll look pretty good. So I highly recommend. Oh, the other thing is that tab right there is up. So that pin is a little bit thinner than these two pins. And again, why Monogram did this, I don't know. But they did a much better job on all of the alignment pins on their B-17G than on this kit. So I still need to clean these parts up a little bit, but it really looks good. The other thing I did was I thinned this backing just a little bit. And let me get the other one and show you the difference between the two. Sorry, I had to reach for it. Here's the backing on one from a box, and you can see the difference in the backings here. And you can see the rocker arms, I had to sand them down just a little bit to get them to fit. But once it's inside the fuselage and painted, you're not going to notice. The only person that's going to know it is you. So now on these 1830s, that is the piece that goes straight up. So don't glue it like this. It's got to be like this. Fuel pumps or the oil pumps at the top. So that concludes the modifications to the engines, and now we're ready to move on to the next step. We'll assemble the wings and see how everything starts to go together. I've got the discs which hold the engines in place glued to the backside of the engine nacelle, and they don't really fit very well. And what I did was, again, I had cut these down to about 7/32 and glued them in place. And then when I checked the fit, I noticed that the plate was slightly this way. So what I did was I used this razor saw and cut these down, just cut them in half, and that provided enough loss of plastic that when I pushed it back down and super glued these, it leveled that out, and it provided for a little bit of play in the engines. And now the engines sit flat up against that plate, and I got a little bit of play here for positioning when I go ahead and use some tester's glue around here and position these. The other thing you need to be aware of is that these are left and right, and what you need to make sure of is that piece right there is open, so that the air intakes, which the Monogram gives you 3 different types of air intakes, So they sit right on top of that opening. So you need to make sure that you've got the left and right ones correctly. If you do it, if you mix them up, you're going to get that. So you want to make sure that you have the right engine cover on the right nacelle. So this one goes with this one, and this one, now I had to do the same thing here. I cut it down with that razor saw and re-glued it back, and by repositioning it, it gave me enough room to do it again. I got a little bit of play here for positioning, and it's going to look really, really good when it's done. So again, these engines look a lot better than the Monogram ones. So we're ready for painting. Just need to fix that little stub right there. I missed that one when I cleaned everything up, and we're ready to go. So and when I get to it, the separate engine exhaust, I'll show you how I drill those out. But this is ready to go. Monogram gives you 3 different sizes of air intakes for the engines, and a large one, an intermediate one, and of course a tiny one. Whoops. So I chose the intermediate one. The problem with this large one is it covers these 2 access portals right here. So I chose the intermediate one, this one here, and there's no positioning tab. So what I did was I carefully positioned and taped the front of the engine nacelle in place, and then carefully positioned and taped the engine cowling in place. And then I put 2 tiny drops of Testor's glue right on the inside edge here, just enough for it to contact the surface, and carefully positioned it in place. So you can get really, really close, and then you eye it, and that's how you do it. So it pretty much almost touches the front end of the engine cowling. So after it dried, I went ahead and pulled it off, and then with my trusty stiff wire applicator, I put a drop of super glue on both sides on the inside, and then once that was dry, then I ran a bead on the outside to seal it, and then all I have to do now is just carefully scrape that tiny bead of super glue that's sitting on the surface of the engine cowling, which would be easy to do, and then I'll polish it with a ball of steel wool. So that's how I did it, and I think you'll find it pretty easy to do that. What's important is to ensure the proper positioning in the front of the engine nacelle and the engine cowling. Once you accomplish that and use these engraved surfaces up against these very, very petite raised panel lines here to position the engine cowling first, and I mean the front of the engine nacelle and then the engine cowling, and you'll get it close. So those are my recommendations on how to use the air intakes, or how to attach the air intakes. I had showed you earlier that I had drilled out one of the exhaust manifolds, and I'm almost done with the other one. So they came out pretty good. Got a little bit more work to do on this one. And these are the progressive drill bits that I used in order to drill out this plastic. And I started out with my trusty twist drill. Then for the larger bits, graduated to this vise assembly here. Smaller ones on this side, bigger ones on this side. And then finally, the larger bits, I use this. So this is a 0.098, and what I'm going to do here is just carefully, without using the vise, just kind of rotate it just a little bit around the edges in order to thin out that plastic just a little bit more, especially in the back. And by pushing down a little bit, you can do that. Yeah, it kind of makes a mess, but we're almost there. And I think we got it. So we'll just clean it up just a little bit with the tip of the number 11 X-Acto blade. I think we got it. Yep, close enough. There you go. They look a heck of a lot better than... So this one is slightly thinner. So let me go ahead and just do this a little bit more. And we'll get on the sides here. You got to be careful. You don't want to collapse. I don't have a spare here, so let me come down a little bit to a 0.093. There we go. And what I'm doing is just kind of reaming the edge, thin it out just a little bit. Close enough. I'll call that a win. Okay, we got it. Now we're there. So, I just need to prime and airbrush these, and they're ready for installation. So that's how I do my drilling. What's important is to use progressively larger drill bits. If you go too large, you're going to bind the bit and ruin the plastic, and it's easy to collapse an edge here. So you got to be careful. But you can really get some good results if you take your time. Not bad. Not bad. The landing gear has very, very fine mold lines that need to be scraped off on all of this framing. So I scraped it off and then checked it with some silver paint, and came out pretty good. And you have to do it on both these two main pieces here. So that's how I got rid of all the mold lines. On the tire, the fit is fairly tight, but I ran a bead of super glue all the way around here to close the gaps and glue it real well. You're going to lose a little bit of this tread detail, and I'll show you on the assembled one here in a second, but once it's painted, it'll look pretty good. So that's how I did the tires, and I glued them together first with tiny drops of Testor's red tube glue, and then once that was dried, then I ran that bead of super glue around the tire rim. Now on these, you can actually pop this tire on and off here from this assembled landing gear. You have to be careful, but it can be done, which is what I've done here. And I checked the seam all along here with some silver paint. And this one is bit assembled, and of course you've got these two main frames. And then these two additional pieces, they don't fit very well. And so I used some Testor's red tube glue to kind of set the locations and adjust the fit so that they looked good. And then hit them with some super glue. So all looks pretty good. Now, on the interior, if you just glue it into place, into its openings, it's not going to sit correctly. And the reason is there's an interior detail tab here, and you can see it right there. That has to be shortened so that this landing gear will butt up against the bulkhead. And if you don't do that, it's going to sit at an angle. So I did it on this one. You can see here where I cut it off a little bit. So now, and by the way, these can be assembled and then installed after the wings all glued up. So that now, let me see if I can get these into place. There we go. Now it sits flat up against the bulkhead like it's supposed to. So, looks pretty good. There we go. Sorry, I got the camera pushed far down and have to keep reminding myself of that. So again, these can be assembled and installed after you've done all the painting. Now, I think I can get this one installed here to show you the difference. There we go. See how it sticks out a little bit? Right there. Sticks out a little bit. And what you want is that framing to be butted up against that bulkhead, and it doesn't do it. So that's why I made that modification. But yeah, it's looking pretty good. So now, the only thing I'll have to do, now this one fits on this side, which is the other thing. You have to be careful to follow the instructions because there is a slight difference in the framing. So you want this one on this side, and then when you glue these tires, you got to make sure that these tires are straight like that. Otherwise, they're going to sit at an angle and they're going to look funny. So let me go ahead and get that and see. You want it not like that, you want it like that. So a little bit of white glue will do that trick, and then you can hit it with super glue afterwards. But Monogram did a fairly good job on representing the landing gear. There is another actuator which actually goes from here forward, which you can add later on, and I'll show you. I've got a picture of it that I'll show you. But you know, if you're going to have it sitting on its landing gear, you're not going to see that. But looks pretty good. And again, these can be assembled and installed last after the wings are assembled and the wings are attached to the fuselage. You've got all the sanding work done. So again, Monogram did a fairly good job of representing the detail and what the actual landing gear looks like. So it's looking good. I've got the tail wheel assembled, and I did some slight modifications, and let me show you what they are. On the kit, the axles are molded right here, and then what you do is you put the wheel in place and then glue these two halves together. And if you do that, it makes it really hard to paint everything. So what I did was I cut off these protruding axles, sanded these areas smooth, and then went ahead and glued it all together, ran a bead of super glue around the seam line, and cleaned it up. And so that came out pretty good. Now on the wheel, what I did was I put a .060 inch rod through here, and it fit fairly well. It was a little bit of play in it, about 3 or 4 thousandths, and super glued it by running a bead of super glue around each side of the outside of the hole. And then I form fitted it, carefully cutting it down so that now it does this. So now what I can do is I'll take a really small Waldron punch, this one here, punch out a small disc of masking tape and put that disc right here, to put two here and here, and I can go ahead and airbrush this. When I'm ready, I can just take that tiny piece of masking tape off, and then I can position this properly, and that'll allow me to play with it a little bit. And then I'll just put a drop of super glue on here with my trusty stiff wire applicator, and we'll be done. So just a slight modification, and but it'll work a lot better than trying to do it the way Monogram designed the kit.
Thanks for watching part 2. And in part 3, we're going to concentrate on the small parts, clean them up, paint them, and weather them. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give us a thumbs up. And when you get the chance, visit our website at www.mikeashley.com, where you're going to find dozens of free PDF downloads, including tutorials, picture references, model galleries, projects, and my 5 original scale modeling books. Thanks to Ben Sound and Videvo for the royalty-free music, and happy scale modeling!